All right, hello and welcome to lesson 20 of Unit 5. And that's not a mistake. We're doing lesson 20 on purpose. We're skipping, I think, 17, 18, and 19 because those are just kind of like, not that we wouldn't have done them if we had time, but they're just leading up to like the reason why the sphere has the volume formula that it does have. And we're just going to skip that and just go straight to using the formula. So you guys will get that at some point in high school. It's not really as important, I don't think, as being able to apply it and use it. That's like going to be the most common thing to show up on a test or standardized test or something like that. So, all right. Activity 1 says to sketch a sphere. So they show you, you start by drawing a circle, and then you do this solid line on one side and the dashed line on the back side, and that is supposed to give it depth. So now you look at it and it looks more like it's three-dimensional. So yeah, if you were to sketch the radius, it would look something like, here's the center, right, and here is the radius. Oops, okay. So I just put in the formula is 4/3 pi r cubed. That's the formula. Kind of a lot of different reasons why the 4/3, where that came from. That's what those lessons talked about. And it's more or less just like comparing the sphere to like cylinders and cones and what can fit in which, and how much of what is, how much of this type of thing fits in that type of a thing. And so after all of those sorts of calculations, you come up with 4/3. And then the reason why it's cubed is, as far as I'm concerned, it's because it's a three-dimensional object, right? Like a sphere is like, it's like a tennis ball. It's something that you can hold. It has 3 dimensions to it versus, other things we're talking about. And it also doesn't have any sides to it per se. Like it doesn't have a bottom, if that makes sense, like how a cone and a cylinder. I guess those are technically three-dimensional as well, but they don't have no sides. Like they have a base. So I think that is why it's the cubed, but I am not a geometry expert by any means. So when you guys get to geometry, ask your geometry teachers specifically why that's cubed, but I believe it has something to do with that. It's unique shape, that it doesn't have that base like the others do. So this is linked to a video, which I'll try to open. Maybe it will work. Okay, cool. So you guys can see this. So pretty much they're just showing you like, here's, a sphere, and that's how it fits in a cylinder, and here's a cone. And when we pour the volume of the cone into the cylinder with the sphere in it, it completely covers it. So that is kind of a little bit of why it's the 4/3. 4/3 is really just 1 1/3, right? So it's like one whole of whatever that whole is relating to, and an extra third. This just trying to show you kind of where the formula came from again. Okay, so activity 2 gives you a sphere, a cone, and a cylinder, and it says they have the same radius and the same heights. The radius of the cylinder is 5 units. Express all terms and answers of pi. Express all answers in terms of pi. A lot of you didn't know what this meant on the quiz, and all it means is write your answer with pi. Don't multiply it out. Okay, so what is the height of the cylinder? So they give you the radius is 5, and if we look at this, if this is 5, the diameter is the same as the height. So Double 5 is 10. So that would be 10, right? Because like all the way across. So that's 10. What is the volume of the cylinder? So then we go back to the volume formula, which is what? Volume equals pi r squared times height, which is pi times 25, because 5 squared, times 10. So 250 pi. Okay. What is the volume of the cone? So then the cone would be volume, oops, that's weird. Let's do a different color. Volume, what we can do to make this easier though. Volume is just 1/3 of what we got. So 1/3 of 250 pi, right? So you're just doing 250 divided by 3. So what does that equal? 250 divided by 3. Oh, wait. 250 divided by 3 is 83.3. So 83.3 pi, volume of the cone. And then the very last one is what is the volume of the sphere? Explain your reasoning. Okay. So I need to look at the formula because I don't have it memorized. 4/3 pi r cubed. So this one, so 4/3 pi r cubed. Okay, so then we do 4/3 times pi, and the radius is 5 cubed. So 5 cubed is 5 times 5 times 5. So it's like 25 times 5, if that makes sense. I don't know if you have a calculator that does cubed, but if it does, go for it. That will save you time. But 25 times 5 is 125. So this is 125. And then pi, and then 4/3. So if you just ignore the pi, you're really just doing 4/3 times 125 over 1. So you do 125 times 4. That's 500 over 3. If you leave it this way, that's fine. If you like decimals, that ends up being 166.7. But, I mean, either way, like, you could have even, honestly, on this one, if you just wanted to be like, oh, it's 250 over 3 pi. That's also totally fine. But don't forget the pi, because there's a pi in this answer. And that one, too. Okay. Do we do the whole thing? Yeah. So it's just, I mean, for the most part, when you take these classes, unless you like want to major in math or something one day, or engineering, like, if you just memorize the formulas and you know how to apply them, that's really all you need to know how to do. There's a little bit of geometry where you're gonna have to like know like proofs, which is just like, how did people come up with this? How can you explain how this formula originated, or explaining how something came about. But for the most part, if you can just memorize and apply formulas, you'll be fine. So don't worry too hard if you're like concerned with not really understanding, the difference between all the formulas. Just for now, just memorize them. Okay. Last activity, activity 3. This one's kind of confusing. I'll walk you through the whole thing. It might help some of you, it might confuse some of you. They're trying to just prove like how the sphere formula came about one last time. I don't think it's necessary really, but I mean, it's trying to get ready for high school when you're like you're gonna have to deal with proofs, which is just you explaining in detail how something is the way that it is in geometry. I don't know how to explain that anymore because a lot of what you'll do then we have not yet done. But it's just about, explaining how certain shapes are certain ways and stuff like that. So they give you a cone, a cylinder, and a sphere. So what is the height of the cylinder in terms of r? So if you remember from this problem, I told you guys that the height was the diameter, right? Diameter is 2 of the radius. So this is 2r, right? 2 radiuses is the height. Yeah, so that's another way to write it. I mean, again, this isn't like you're going to ever have a test question on this. I don't think you would ever have test questions like this in high school either. It's just to kind of give you more background information. What is the volume of the cylinder in terms of R? So we know the volume formula is like this, right? Volume equals pi r squared times height, but now our height is 2r. So we're just plugging 2r in. If you want to get fancy and you want to simplify it and say, oh, that's pi r cubed because r squared times r is cubed, go for it. But we haven't reviewed that, adding exponents and stuff. So don't worry about it. But this is just trying to show you where the formula came from. So what is the volume of the cone in terms of r? So remember, the formula for a cone is 1/3 pi r squared, and then we just keep, the 2r for the height. So again, if you wanted to, you could multiply the 2 by the 1/3, you get 2/3, and you get cubed. So it's like leading up to why the sphere is 4/3. Okay, so what is the volume of the sphere in terms of r? So we know the formula is 4/3 pi r cubed, and the reason for that, and this is going to be really confusing to some of you, and it'll make sense to others. And again, there's a big gap here because we skipped some lessons, but the reasoning is that how you get 4/3 pi r cubed is because we took 2 pi r cubed, and we subtracted it from 2/3 pi r cubed. And here I totally messed up. Well, I didn't totally mess up, but I forgot to put a 2 here. So we're just you're subtracting the cylinder from the cone, and then that gives you the sphere. So that kind of goes back to this idea, right? Where you have a cylinder, you have a cone, and you have a sphere. I know this. I know this. I do not know this, right? So if you subtract, 1 from the other, right? Like we're going to dump in the volume of the cylinder, this is going to get poured into here, and then this gets all filled with water that's dyed blue. And then what ends up happening is that if you subtract the difference, right, between your cylinder, which is this thing, right, that I'm highlighting in red, and your cone, this thing, if you do the square, or cylinder, not square, minus cone, you get the sphere. So they just kind of wanted to show you that's where that formula came from. I hope that kind of makes sense. This is just really difficult stuff to understand and to explain, especially when we're not actually in class. Okay, so number 5, a volume of the cone is 1/3 the volume of a cylinder. And that's, from the math we just did. The volume of the sphere is what fraction of the volume of the cylinder. So the easiest way for me to understand this is just think like Well, it's going to have to add up to 3 over 3, right? Because everything has to reach a whole. Just like this little video thing, it reached a whole, right? Like we filled the whole thing, everything had a volume that was at capacity. So if I want to get 3 over 3 and I have 1 over 3, then how many more do I need? What's 3 minus 1, right? So like 3 over 3 minus 1 over 3, well, that's 2 over 3. So that means that a sphere is 2/3 the volume of a cylinder. I hope that kind of makes sense. Again, this is getting more complicated, and in high school you're going to have math teachers that are math majors. I was not a math major, so I'm not a math expert, but that I hope made a little bit of sense. And I think we are done. Yes. Okay. So you have a test. The final test will be next week. I want to say it might be the same day your papers due. I don't know, or the day before. You'll have a study guide on Monday. Probably test on Tuesday or Wednesday. I'll see how many people really need help. But if no one's reaching out for help, I'm going to assume you guys are just ready to get it over with, so we'll probably do it Tuesday. So if you do need help, ask for help at 11:35 every day. Do your practice problems.